The following transmission is between myself and a Fallout YouTuber who goes by the Wanderer2287, who I have collaborated with on many different projects. Some of you might remember him as the guest voice on a video I made some months ago talking about the Quantum Exo-1 power armor controversy, and his knowledge and expertise was of great importance when covering this topic. Wanderer is an artist, a lore historian, deeply passionate about the world of Fallout, and is perhaps the foremost expert when it comes to power armor. He's made lore videos discussing the Enclave, Fallout, and while he is still young, is an up-and-coming member of the newer wave of Fallout content creators. Over the course of our conversation, we talk about the Wanderer's artistic journey related to Fallout, Maladaptive Daydreaming, and what the new generation of Fallout fans will come to understand about the universe and the fanbase as a whole. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of the Atomcast, the best way you can show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmissions, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. Links to our Patreon, as well as guest socials, will be linked in the description below. Without further ado, the Enclave Runaway, Wanderer. So one of the things that I've kind of wanted to do with this podcast in general, and like a conceptual thing, is kind of sit down with noteworthy members of, at least starting off, the Fallout community. If I can branch into other communities, that'd be awesome. Talk about more general things. That'd be cool. If it doesn't happen, whatever. There's always plenty of talk about with Bethesda related games, especially the like creation games, as I refer to them, like Skyrim, Fallout, Starfield now. But one of the things with the podcast specifically that I want to do is I want to talk to people who kind of represent some sort of important facet or noteworthy standing in the community. I've had so far anyway, as the time of this recording, I've talked with Cazador, who was a both legendary and notorious figure in the bare bones of the Fallout 76 PvP community. I've talked with Phobos, who was a noteworthy member of, and then later a very outspoken critic of, the Fallout Frontier development team. In the larger scope, and more so specifically related to your position and what you've done so far, how do you feel you have, what kind of place do you feel you've created or brought to the table or worked to gain in the Fallout community? What do you see as your contribution to the community?
Well, I kind of see myself as somewhat of a bit of a fanboy, if you will. I started playing Fallout and things like that when I was about 12. I got Fallout 4 when I was about 12 for Christmas in 2015.
Was Fallout 4 your first Fallout game?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's crazy to think about, but yeah, it was my first one.
I am almost contractually obligated, as somebody who runs a Fallout podcast, to immediately vibe check all my guests and be like, what was your first Fallout game? And unfortunately, Wanderer, you said something other than Fallout 76, so we're going to have to terminate we're going to have to end this conversation. You're clearly not a real Fallout fan.
Fuck you, Toshi. But yeah, so I started with 4 back in 2015, like just shortly after it came out, because I got it for Christmas, because obviously a 12-year-old's not going to have disposable income or anything. So I started playing back then. I got really into like Fallout 4 as a game, and a lot of the mechanics. Obviously, in later life, growing up and looking back as someone who's in my actual life, like outside of being a Fallout YouTuber and someone who absolutely loves Fallout, I am going into the game industry, hopefully as a career, and as somebody who looks at games from somewhat of an objective standpoint. I don't think Fallout 4 hit many of the marks that I thought it did when I was 12. but it definitely hit a few of those, and I can definitely respect it for getting me into Fallout, as I've kind of established a connection with so many different people who also share the same appreciation for all the other games in the franchise, and that's something I can really appreciate about it. And I think with my copy, I got Fallout 3 for free with that Fallout 4 copy. So I played that. I was like, me and my 12-year-old man was like, what the fuck is this? The graphics are shit. I have no ammo, and yeah. That's all I was really thinking about.
The graphics are shit. I can't shoot. Why does anyone play this?
And then when I got to Fallout New Vegas, even funnier story. I was one of those motherfuckers that headed straight to the tower and got eaten by cazadors halfway. So I was like,
God.
what the fuck is this?
So the game won't let me play.
Yeah, I quit playing again. And then I was like, you know what? I'm reading a lot of shit online. I'm seeing a lot of YouTube videos. And I was like, I want to be a Fallout YouTuber one day. And this is around the time I started my channel. And I was like, I want to be a Fallout YouTuber one day. That means I have to finish these games.
Yeah.
So I finished Fallout 3 first, and I quite enjoyed the story. Though, obviously, later in life, I've become quite critical towards the end of the story, but that's another story for another day. And with Fallout New Vegas, I was like, all right, I really need to finish this game, and I really need to see if it's all that, because I've heard, like, it's the best Fallout game, and, like, I've heard so many different things. And I played it all the way through, did the NCR ending, and I fucking loved it. I genuinely like fell in love with everything about that game. The world space, the quests, the narrative, everything. Like, New Vegas was something that really captured my heart in a way I can't describe. It was so much stronger than Fallout 4, and I think that's because my dad had me growing up on westerns. He loves like westerns, spy films, shit like that, and all that western kind of inspiration that New Vegas had really helped me love the game even more. And I think that's kind of where my journey with Fallout started, as a YouTuber at least. So that's kind of where my inspiration is drawn from. But as for what I bring to the table, if you will, I have always, even when I was a young kid, always loved writing stories, characters, things like that. So I have a very keen eye for storytelling, which is why I do Fallout lore videos. So I decided, probably in about 2019, when I was about 16, that I was going to do a few different lore series on my channel. So I wanted to start with the Enclave, because I thought they were really fascinating villains, and I thought their ideology was something quite interesting to nitpick at. And especially their technology side of things, I found their power armor, like, obviously, like, pink Enclave helmet is like my fucking icon. Like, I love the Enclave power armor. It's one of my favorite designs in video game history, really. If I had to pick between, I don't know, Master Chief's armor in Halo 2, next to the Fallout 2 power armor that we saw back in the day with the Enclave officers, I'd probably pick the Enclave Advanced over the Mark 6 in Halo. Which is just, like, how much I love this armor.
What is, like, what specifically about the armor, what calls to you about it? What are you drawn to about the armor specifically? Because, like, you know, a lot of people like you really enjoy it, and I think part of that is because they're like older veterans of the series. The insectoid looking helmet is very iconic, especially people who started playing like Fallout 1, Fallout 2, even Fallout 3, like me. But like, to you specifically, not having that mask of nostalgia, because you said Fallout 4 was your first Fallout game, and very notably, there's no Enclave references in Fallout 4, or at least no visual references other than the Exo 1 power armor itself. How, like, what specifically is so attention grabbing to you about the Enclave armor, the old Exo 1 Mark II power armar?
So,
or advanced power armor for more veteran players.
For lore accurate motherfucker.
Right. Get it right.
Back in Fallout 4, one of the things I was really interested in was the whole leveling system, that every time you leveled up, say you got the level 15, level 20, there was a more of a chance that you'd find T51B lying around, or T60, or a higher grade of power armor that was the Raider or the T45. So that gameplay mechanic kind of got me interested a bit more in the different tiers of power armor and stuff. But when I first laid eyes on the X01, I was like, wow, that's a cool design. So one of the things that really drew me towards it was definitely the face, the helmet, the visage, if you will, the bug eyes, that kind of like beak-like shape it's got going on with the gas mask part of it. I suppose you could call it like I don't know what kind of language you could use for that part of the mask, but it was definitely
the bottom part near your mouth.
Yeah, it was definitely more like the gas mask style to things, as well as the insectoid look to it.
I think that would be called like
I
think that would be called like a respirator.
Yeah, like a respirator. Yeah. I completely lost the word, but definitely like the respirator shape and the eyes, the visors, if you will.
Yeah.
All of that was just very menacing to me. It was like kind of like almost psychological in a way. It was like meant to strike fear into you when you saw it on the battlefield, especially knowing how powerful that is. And that really drew me to it, as well as the big shoulder plates. Obviously you have that big in Fallout 4 with the X01, it's split into multiple pieces, but in the older games, like in New Vegas, for example, it's all one piece. It's like a big turtle shell-like cover for your shoulders, and it's very protective. And that was something else I'd never really seen before in power armor designs. I've always grew up playing Halo and watching Star Wars, so I'd never really seen a design like that before, and it was very interesting to see. So that's definitely something that drew me towards the X01 in the beginning.
Yeah. It was interesting hearing you talk about like your experience first playing Fallout 4 and then later playing the older games, and like you said it yourself, you have a much more like story focused mind. Like that's how your brain thinks, and me personally, I can definitely understand that, because I am somebody who also had that kind of experience. I originally went to college specifically for like filmmaking and script writing and stuff like that, and so like I usually in my Discord, anyway, I share a lot of stuff. I sometimes talk about more like what's going on with my life. Like right now, as of the time of this recording, I'm in the tail end of an IT training class to go into the IT field. But so like last night, it is March 11th, so this would be March 10th. Last night I'm just watching TikTok and stuff, and let me know if this kind of sounds familiar to you. I ran across a TikTok video that started off with as most TikTok videos do, text on the screen, and it says POV, after 97 laps around your room, the character in your head just did something completely unscripted, altering the plot line and changing the entire story. The video is like a minute long. I'll send it to you later, but the video is a minute long, and the lady that stitched it says that what this is because I used to do this too. I used to go outside like well into my teenage years, and I would just walk around. I lived in the woods at the time. I'd walk around in the woods. I'd walk up and down the path that led to my grandmother's house further in the woods. I'd walk around this big tree that was in our front yard, and I would just like it said, I would create these stories in my head, like characters that I recognized from like cartoons, from anime creations in my own head. They would go on these big elaborate adventures and shit like that. And this is apparently something called I think I'm reading this correctly. I think it's called maladaptive daydreaming, and it's basically a coping mechanism. I don't think it's for like trauma or anything, but it is that like storytelling process. It is the process of um taking elements from your life, taking characters from your life, and every once in a while there's a self-insert character, like this character is you, or this character is representative of how you feel or how you perceive yourself to be with relation to the world, or maybe more specifically the world that you created. But where that, because it's all gonna go back to Fallout. Where that relates to Fallout is, as you said, you had a very, where you were obviously very excited for Fallout 4 when that was coming out and stuff, and then rather when you went back and played like Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout New Vegas, you had a more like, maybe not negative reaction, but because it was kind of dated technology to you at that point, it was a lot harder to kind of like pick up. I think it was more like a Zoomer brain thing, if you know what I mean. I was 12 years old at the time, so it was like, can you really blame me? All my friends were like, oh, you got to get this game, the graphics look so good and shit. Like, we were all very obsessed with graphics back in the day, but nowadays I love older graphics, actually. Right. But so, I mean, like, even like, regardless of the reason why, you had at least an initial pushback against Fallout New Vegas, be it because of, the way the game handles the graphics, this, that, the other thing. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you had sort of a negative experience to what I had, because when I first started off, it was with, Fallout 3, and then I transitioned to Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 4 and stuff like that. And I remember very clearly sitting in my high school library and just like reading these like little tiny, like, I was like a senior, because I remember also doing this in college classes, sitting at the computer, and I was reading these new like stories and these Wikipedia entries for this new Fallout game that was coming out that takes place in the desert and takes place in Las Vegas and stuff like that. And I remember, again, very vividly, like walking up and down the path, like walking around the woods, and I was spinning this own little narrative in my head, doing maladaptive daydreaming about, like, characters that I recognized, characters that I enjoyed, and like creating new characters and new events and new stories that took place in what at the time was going to be Fallout, the setting of Fallout 76, the dusty, abandoned, sand riddled New Vegas Strip, the middle of the desert, people getting, killed, crucified, all, yeah, that makes me sound like so much more of a sociopath than I intended it to. But like, the stories and the things that you think up of. I mean, I was a teenager going into college at the time, so my mind's a little bit more adult orientated. You think about violence, strife, conflict, things like that differently in that transitional phase. But yeah, it was a much different experience, because I sort of fell into that. I had that maladaptive daydreaming. Again, the person in the video describes it as a coping mechanism. I don't remember specifically what coping in general, but it could also just be like a processing method. How you process things, how you process expressively inward or expressively outward. She mentioned specifically that not a lot of people get to take what's in their head and like create something of it, unless you're like a filmmaker, or I guess a writer, as you are, an artist in some way. Did you ever have something similar to that, the way I described maladaptive daydreaming?
Yeah, like all the time.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you were 12, so like I was doing it for like ever. When you were 12, and specifically like you're starting to become more involved with Fallout and stuff like that, was there like a noticeable shift where it's like, previously you had all your stories taking place in a completely other world, another location, but then when you started getting more into Fallout, they started taking place in worlds that were more similar to Fallout? Or like, what kind of, especially at like 12 years old, that sort of formative, like in between, again, it's an in between phase. Did that kind of start to change and shift your daydreaming process and transition into shaping your larger storytelling settings, outlooks, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So I'd say when I was 12, a lot of my stories were Halo related. I started playing Halo almost just over 10 years ago now. And a lot of my stories up until that point were all just Halo stories about Spartans fighting elites and things like that, and ODSTs and like big recon missions, things like that. And then when I played Fallout, it was a very different environment, and it shifted. All of my thoughts were all directed towards this one IP in the Wasteland and things like that, to the point where I did actually, when I was 12 years old, start to write a Fallout GB, is what I called it, Fallout Great Britain, and it was set within my local area, which is in like it's on like the sea front. So there was a lot of interesting ideas that I had, but at the end of the day, would it hold up to Fallout London? No.
Yeah, I was about to say you started at fucking Fallout London has some intellectual property monetization. They got to start paying you.
Yeah. But I had a lot of really cool ideas, but whether they were lore friendly, whether they were well thought out or not, it was like probably not. No.
Yeah.
I had a Brotherhood spin-off faction in the United fucking Kingdom. Obviously that's not going to end well. If it didn't work in the Frontier, it didn't work here, but to be fair, it did kind of work in the Frontier actually.
You're talking about the Templars specifically?
Yeah, I thought they were a decent faction actually.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. Like, there were aspects of the faction that were kind of, maybe not not the greatest planned out, like America and the whole, like a lot like I remember a lot of people were saying that like America and the other gal, I can't fucking remember her name, but like there was like the psychic girl and then like the mechanic girl who was like the big sister to America and stuff like that, and they all had a very like almost like overtly intentional anime kind of feel to them. The damaged girl that has intense supernatural abilities, and the needy younger sister and the kind of tomboyish older sister and stuff like that. It was all very traditional, maybe not traditional, but like typical anime style stuff. But yeah, as like a larger whole, the Templars weren't like too bad. You kind of transitioned a lot of, I would imagine anyway, you kind of transitioned a lot of that like early storytelling and early like conceptual Fallout that the effect of your sort of transitioning maladaptive daydreaming stuff, especially when it relates to Fallout, that kind of, it's, you do a lot of like writing and storytelling specifically around Fallout, not just lore related stuff, but other, like original content created stuff. What was the process like going from that maladaptive daydreaming and how that sort of changed, and then morphing that into like what obviously you do YouTube now, but you also do like writing stuff. What was that process like?
So I'd say the way it worked was I listened to a lot of critic style videos on YouTube about various different narratives, and I also got some feedback from friends at the time, and when it came to actually writing my stories as well, I got feedback from some friends online. One of the ones that stands out to me is Broadway, who's a member of the TKS Mantis community, or was. And he gave me a lot of advice on writing the story for, much like you said earlier about making characters that are based off ourselves. That's the entirety of the Wanderer. He is meant to be who I would be in Fallout. He's everything I would do. the background I would kind of follow, and the morals I would follow, and the sacrifices I would make. He is pretty much the embodiment of who I am in the Fallout universe.
Mhm.
And his story to begin with, much like I spoke, I made a year retrospective on that entire thing. So in that video, I spoke a lot about things that could be changed or things that were changed during development, and a lot of that was thanks to people who helped me kind of formulate those ideas, which was a part of that kind of shift period that I had. So I'd say it started off as a lot of very early ideas, which then transitioned into criticizing those ideas, nitpicking those ideas to kind of give them a bit more of a solid shape, chisel them out, if you will, which then transitioned into a much larger picture and where I could take those branches going forward, if you will. And going back to kind of the daydreaming, if you will, that's kind of where this was born from. So I used to just go on walks on my own. I wasn't really like a particularly popular guy at school. I only had like a handful of friends at the time. I think this was when I was about 14, 13. So just after I'd started playing Fallout and when I was really into New Vegas at the time, I just used to go on walks during the summer just to kind of clear my head a bit and just to kind of kill the time a little bit, kill the day and not spend all day indoors, because my mom used to shout at me for being on Xbox too long.
Mom, I'm playing Xbox.
Yeah, literally.
I can't
like,
pause
get
the
the fuck
game.
out of my room. I'm playing Minecraft. Like, yeah,
I'm
literally
playing
shit like that.
Minecraft.
So like, it used to be like that. So I used to just be like, oh fuck it, I need some fresh air. So I used to do some walks, and then I found this place that kind of really resonates with me. It's an old abandoned quarry near my house, and I used to go on walks there all the time, and it really inspired me almost. And at the time I was watching all of these Fallout New Vegas videos and a lot of stuff on the Enclave and things like that. And that's when I was like, I want an Enclave character that resembles me from a moral standpoint and a personality standpoint, that runs away from the Enclave because they are bad and starts a new life for himself in the wasteland, and runs away to a location like this and starts a new life. And that's kind of where my ideas started to take shape and things like that.
When you were and this is more just so my own confirmation, so I feel a little bit, I mean, because like the maladaptive daydreaming stuff, like it makes a lot of sense, but you always kind of have to, like, you know, check with other people, like, this makes sense in my head, does it make sense in your head? Please tell me I'm not crazy. When you, like, you know, go on these walks and go to these locations, like you said, the quarry and stuff, for me it was never really that far from my house. Again, we lived in the woods, so like occasionally I would just walk up and down the driveway and stuff like that. But when you would be at these locations or go on these walks or anything, did you also have like a cool stick that you found that was like a sword or a staff or like a gun or something like that? Did you have something like that?
I can't remember if I did. I want to say yes, because I was one of those types of guys.
Yeah.
But then
well, you're a guy. You find a cool stick. It becomes, you know, your cool stick. Actually, you don't even have to be a guy. You just be human. You find a cool stick and like, I found a cool stick.
Yeah.
It's a sword.
Normalize finding cool sticks.
Yeah.
As adults.
For guys, it's digging holes. Like, that's our thing. Like, I dig a hole. Like, oh, I dug a hole. Like, bro, dug a hole.
diggy hole.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, I had a couple of different sticks, but there was this one specifically that I kind of liked more than all the other ones. It was kind of, it was shaped a little bit like a scimitar, you know, like like it's like a curved blade and stuff like that. It was really cool. It was a lot like longer, and the curve wasn't as, you know, as extreme, but yeah, it was really cool. So like, I mean, obviously you're a YouTuber, you're a streamer, that's what you do now. And like, do you do a lot of like maybe not alternative, but like separate from like YouTube or streaming and stuff like that, where a lot of your storytelling, YouTube specifically, I guess, where a lot of your storytelling is based in the video? Do you do a lot of like outside writing along these lines?
Yes. So one of the things I have been writing since around last summer is a science fiction film that is heavily based on games I've played, such as No Man's Sky, which I got very heavily invested into over lockdown in 2021, and films that I watched fairly recently in the last year or so, such as Blade Runner 2049, which has grown to be one of my favorite films ever. So I wanted to write a story like that and have it set in a universe kind of inspired by things like Star Wars and No Man's Sky again, and just kind of have a universe like that with a character with a very tragic backstory and a very tragic setting. Not entirely post-apocalyptic, but definitely dark and dystopian. So that's something I've been writing for quite some time now. And it's got a lot of influences in there. The main character is meant to be based off Diego Luna, who is also the actor for Cassian Andor in Star Wars. And yeah, it's got a lot of dystopian Blade Runner and No Man's Sky influence in there. Apart from that, not really, but I have tried to write, or at least have the basis to write a Star Wars series similar to the Fallout series I do plan on making one day. And it would be set during just after the Knights of the Old Republic, and it would be following a Mandalorian character. And
obviously,
him kind of
because
obviously. So like, it would be following a Mandalorian Jedi hunter who basically just goes around killing Jedi for vengeance and money. And it would slowly show his transition from being someone who's cold and bloodthirsty, and just with a very big hatred towards all kinds of Force users, to someone who is tolerable of their existence, yet still hates them for what they've done, because he discovers that the entire thing he believed about his past was a lie, and it was actually the main villains of the story who did what they did to him and his clan. And the end of the story would be about him sacrificing everything, so that he can save everything he loves, pretty much. His entire clan, his wife, his 3 children, his cousin. So he would go out sacrificing himself to save them. And it's a very dark Star Wars story, kind of in the vein of Andor, but it still has that Star Wars and especially the Old Republic believability to it. And I don't want to be too crazy with the ideas or anything. One of the ideas I had early on was that one of the main villains of the first season or so was going to be trying to draw power or collect Darth Nihilus's mask, who is one of the main villains from KOTOR 2. But I thought that might kind of desecrate the character a bit too much, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to do at that point. But I know there's going to be a big battle in the end, and the main character is going to lose his hand. So yeah.
When in doubt, just blow something up, or have somebody, or have like a main character just die, and then that helps with just transitioning the story from a dead end to something else that you can talk about. Let's backpedal a little bit. Earlier you talked about TKS Mantis. We didn't go too much into that, but I know that you have a history with him, because I think you became like a minor part of the TKS Mantis lore. I think that you actually you weren't in one of his videos, but I think he made like a little kind of throwaway joke video where he was looking at one of your videos and you were like, I'm gonna fight him or whatever, and then like he did a little like square up or something like that. I don't remember. It was something really like small and innocuous, and I think for me anyway, that was like one of the first ways that I learned about you, because I was a big TKS Mantis fan for a while. And then I saw that and I'm like, that's kind of funny. But so like that point, you were at the very least involved in some form in the TKS Mantis lore. And then from just our own back and forth talk specifically, I know that you're also friends with Synonymous, who got really big doing Fallout lore.
Yeah, I haven't spoke to him in a while, but from what I remember, yeah.
Yeah, is he doing good? He hasn't uploaded for a while.
I don't know. I haven't actually spoke to him in probably about a year now. Actually, it's
Fair
been
enough.
quite a long time, but it was pretty much ever since I left Twitter.
Fair.
I haven't really spoke to him. I did shoot him an email, but he never got back to it. I'm just assuming that he's pretty busy.
Yeah.
I like obviously I spoke to him, and we both have pretty busy work lives and educational lives, so I imagine it's probably something to do with those. But I can't really speak on where he is right now. But I hope he is well. And
Yeah.
he's a great inspiration to all Fallout lore YouTubers and non-lore YouTubers as well. Across the board, because the quality of his videos is outstanding, and I'm very glad that he got the success that he deserved. And he's genuinely an inspiration to every single Fallout YouTuber there is.
He is very good at his craft, and I mean, you know, it's sort of, I wouldn't say that it's easy, I wouldn't say that it's difficult, but there is definitely like a pattern with making Fallout lore content. It's more so like limited, you know, like you can be super creative with it, but even within that creativity, there's not much that you can really do. So they kind of all sort of start to blend together after a while. But even then, he makes some really good stuff. But to my to the point of that, not to, you know, puff you up and say like, oh, Wander, he's so great, he knows so many big names in the community.
Honestly, man, I'm not that great.
Yeah. To that though, you have been involved with at least a small number, a couple of big YouTubers, and I don't know. I mean, Synonymous has been in the game for a while. I don't know how he would be considered, but you are kind of, especially when you compare yourself to people like me and people like Mantis, who have been around in the community in some form or another for a very long time. You are much newer to the community, and as somebody who, I mean, you've obviously been involved with Fallout for a very long time. How do you see sort of like things changing, you know? Because once you get like established like Mantis or like Mitten Squad, or even somebody who's been in the game like a very long time, like Al Chessbreach, you can kind of start to lose track of like the arc of history and just kind of see things like day to day or month to month or like year to year. Like how are things going like this year? As somebody who's come in newer and is able to like look back more objectively on sort of like where we came from and like where we are now, how have you seen the community like change, or like what is your relationship conceptually to a lot of the older content creators and like the newer people who are starting to show up in the community, the content creator community, or like the fandom in general? Like, do you see like some kind of generational shift from how a lot of older content creators or just older people in the community think compared to like newer people?
So as for the community, I'd say that a lot of us newer guys definitely, much like me, started out almost inspired by a lot of these other guys. So as shameful as it is to admit nowadays, especially after everything that went down in 2019, one of the main people that actually inspired me to make my channel was Oxhorn.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a great inspiration to me in the beginning. But about 2 years down the line, that's when the entire thing went down with him and the whole controversy, which is actually how I found TKS Mantis and became part of that community.
When you say controversy, are you talking about him potentially being involved with how would I describe it?
The whole false flagging thing and the copyright striking and things of the sort.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was thinking like the accusations that he was like, you know, paid by Bethesda, or, you know, in other words or in other concepts, like propped up to sort of hype up Fallout 76 and stuff like that. But you're talking about
Oh no! If I'm honest, I'm not really particularly bothered if anybody's really a plant for any companies, because at the end of the day, we're all individuals. If people are taking money to talk good about something,
yeah,
then all it can be whittled down to is an opinion at the end of the day, or I guess the word is a shell. So that's kind of the word you'd use for those types of people. But on an individual basis, each and every one of us has the power to form an opinion on a game ourselves. And if that game is objectively good or bad, that's an opinion that we can make on our own. So I'm not really too bothered about people like that. But the one thing I am more bothered about is the silencing of creators using the copyright system.
I think that this is probably, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think this is probably a good time to shed a little spotlight on today's sponsor, NordVPN. They're fantastic. Or no, you said games, so it's got to be Raid Shadow Legends. But yeah, you're talking about I try to keep my fingers in so many pies that I often forget about. You want to like talk briefly about what the allegation was on that front? 'Cause, I mean, you mentioned copyright striking and stuff like that. I have vague recollections of it, but you seem to be a little bit more tuned into that. Do you want to quickly expand on that and then go from there?
I'll say what I remember, but honestly, I can't remember too much. Honestly, if anything, I feel like a few bad apples kind of ruined the morally correct side of the situation, if you will. Much like almost any internet drama I've been in over the last few years. But I'd say with that, Oxhorn was accused by someone called Logical Fallacy of copyright striking his videos for calling out issues in Oxhorn's videos. Now, if you're like me, you'll have no issue with people criticizing your videos. Like I've faced a fair amount of criticism over my years being a YouTuber, and each of it I use to better myself and to see, is this criticism valid? Can I use this to better myself going forward as a YouTuber? And if the answer is yes, take that on board and always think about it when you're creating new videos. But if it's not valid, just ignore it. That's the best kind of way I can talk to newer people in the game. But as for Oxhorn, he was accused of using the copyright system to silence someone criticizing him, which is something I am absolutely against.
Yeah.
And there were people defending him at the time, which we actually got into arguments with, me and a few other people. A few people I remember from back then, Rogue Internet Man, Stewdog, TKS Mantis, and they're all the names I really remember. But that's how I kind of got familiarized with TKS Mantis, and that's how I actually became kind of, I'd say, mates with him. Nowadays we don't talk too much, but he's still someone I highly respect, and I'll never forget the things he's done for me in the past. He's genuinely, he's helped my channel in ways I can't describe. But as for the Oxhorn situation, I really don't remember much apart from him being accused of copyright striking someone that really didn't deserve it.
Yeah, that's because again, I had vague recollections of stuff like that happening, but yeah, like just the false flagging and stuff, like you see it all the time from, I guess, just content creators in general. They're like, I don't like that this person is saying this or talking about this or talking about me, and then they'll just false flag people. It's a fucking stupid, broken system.
Yeah, the thing is that it's a problem that lies deep within YouTube itself. The copyright system itself is broken, and then bad apples will come in and like copyright strike you for no apparent reason just because they disagree with your statement. And I think that's why people like Stewdog are so valued on the platform, because they're the ones that are calling out things like that and kind of keeping people right and things like that as well, because YouTube don't really seem to do much of a good job at it themselves.
Why do we do it? Why do I make content? Why does TKS Mantis? Why does Stewdog? Why does he care? Why does it matter? Why do you do what you do? Why do you write the stories that you do? Why do you create the content that you do? Why do we do it?
So I do it for my own personal enjoyment. I've always loved writing stories. I love Fallout, and I thought, what better way to really have fun and to really build something meaningful than to combine the two, which is exactly what I've been doing for the last few years.
But why though? What do you get out of it? What do you think anybody would get out of it? What do you think I get out of it? What do you think, somebody brand new to, the Fallout community, just content creation in general? What do you think at the end of the day makes it so that we get up, absolutely destroy our mental faculties by hyper focusing and stressing about tiny little details in a game that 20 years from now nobody's going to talk about, and then learn all this stuff like video editing, story structure, to make a video that, again, 20 minutes from now, or actually maybe 20 minutes from now, 20 minutes after the upload, 10 years after the upload, nobody's gonna be remembering or talk about. What is the drive there?
Honestly, I'd say it's more about, for me on a personal level, it's personal interest, and it's never been about YouTube as I guess a career or a hobby. It's more of a hobby to me than anything. I don't see YouTube as a full-time job ever. But for me, it's more about personal enjoyment. I enjoy the Fallout IP. I enjoy the stories. I enjoy the games, and I enjoy story writing. And I think the reason I do it is for self, kind of like gratification, if you will. I really enjoy writing these stories and hearing feedback, and if other people enjoy my stories, then it shows that I've done something good, and it means that I'm making a mark. And I think that's one thing I really want to do, is I want to leave my mark on the Fallout community as someone that tried their damn hardest to take on board criticism and to analyze the Fallout lore and to create a story that most, if not every single member of the Fallout community, whether you fall into the New Vegas fan set or the 76 fan set, which are two very different sides of the coin, but a part of the same IP, if you know what I mean, that almost everybody in the Fallout community can appreciate. And that's something I really want to do. And I want to tell these stories that I've got in my mind, or I want to die trying. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't want to make money, even though I am monetized on YouTube. It's definitely not a livable amount. I don't want to make money off it. I don't want fame. I don't want anything. I just want to tell my stories, really. That's all I want at the end of the day, and I want people to enjoy them.
I think that's a very intrinsically human emotion, desire, what have you, just to whether it's your own personal stories, or your history, or like the stories you make up in your head. You find value in something related to your existence, and you're just out there, and you're like, hey, I just want to talk about this, and I want someone to hear it. And if it's like you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Not to go into big detail and stuff, because this isn't really my place, my story to tell, but for many years my family was sort of well, my mom, my stepdad, and my stepbrother, my younger brother, they were effectively like homeless for a number of years. They were living out of an old van that we had, like an old camper van, not like one of those big things, but like an actual like van, but it's got like a sink and like a bed in it and stuff like that. They were living out of that for a couple years, and there was a lot of stuff that happened in between that time. My little brother was in a foster home for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. My mom and stepdad went through a whole bunch of stuff. Thankfully nothing exceedingly horrible like what happens with a lot of the other poor unfortunate souls that end up having to live on the streets in the United States. But my mom has talked several times about writing a book about her experiences, like how, because she used to live in a good situation. She was a chef for a while. She was a teacher for a good number of years, and then things just kind of happened, and then she ended up in this again comparatively not awful situation, but for her, and how it all eventually, the middle part, and then how it all eventually played out. It eventually played out, fine. You just had to get back into a situation of some kind, but still, like that whole middle part is where a lot of the quote unquote story happens, and a lot of the stress. And I think that a lot of the times, again, either based on our history or based on, just the things we think of, we just want to tell our story and just have it out there for people to, know, to reflect on, to remember that we were even here at all. Like we have, like, you're European. There's writing, there's structures, there's laws, there's history, there's art that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, like long after these people have, died, rotted, and their bones have turned to dust. And God willing, anyway, they'll be around for that much longer, and we'll be able to remember them because they left their mark on, their community, their country, their, like, society, the world in general, whether it be big or small. We remember them. Like, I think it was Van Gogh. He originally started out like nobody he was just like some community artist. Nobody thought his art was good or anything, and then it was only after he died that he became one of the most recognized painters of the modern century.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about Starfield. So like we've talked a little bit about that. So you're trying to, like, avoid a lot of the big information and stuff around the game.
So I saw obviously when they did the showcase last year, I watched that.
The E3 one, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh, that seems interesting. The art style is a little bit bland, a little bit uninspired, in my opinion, as somebody who kind of works a lot with. I may be a story guy, but I'm definitely more an art guy than I am a story guy.
Yeah,
I'm very passionate about the way a story goes, but I'm also very passionate about a way a thing looks, which is kind of goes back to my roots as a Halo fan. I very much like the way the way that the classic games look compared to the newer games like Halo 4 and 5. I find them butt fucking ugly because they have a very, very generic art style about them. Whereas the older ones are more kind of Gundam inspired, which I think is a very good art style.
It's
very strong.
You have an eye for the aesthetics.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And Starfield really wasn't doing it for me. I don't know what it is, but Starfield's graphics, the way Starfield looks as from an art style perspective, just really isn't doing it for me whatsoever. Not the way that Fallout does it for me, for example, with the retro futurism and the 1950s style of things. That's what really captivated me to play Fallout in the beginning, was the art style. But with Starfield, that there is no artistic draw for me. It just looks like a very generic space game.
Is that more so because of the art style and less so because of the graphics?
It's definitely more to do with the art style, I think. Bethesda's never been well known to do graphics great, but Starfield's definitely one of their more pretty games from what I remember seeing.
Yeah.
But it's more to do with the art direction in general. It just looks very, very bland. And that's more of a personal opinion thing. If you think it looks great, that you do you. That's your opinion. In my opinion, I am not excited for the way the game looks. I'm probably gonna mod the fuck out of it. But yeah. So I'm not really a big fan of the way it looks. Narratively, I think it could be pretty interesting. I'm definitely hoping it'll have a stronger main narrative than Fallout 4, for example.
Yeah.
And a lot of the gameplay mechanics look very, very advanced compared to any of their older games, which I think is also a pretty good thing to be excited about. And the fact they've delayed the game so much as well says to me that they are really working to polish this up and not have another Fallout 76.
Not to give away like any spoilers or anything or any like super detailed stuff, but one of the things, especially as somebody who appreciates aesthetics, I think you'll like. You remember the Fallout 4 like hotkey for like weapon switching?
Yeah,
like it was just like a little, a little like plus sign in the bottom of the corner and showed like, oh, this is what's in slot 1, slot 2, stuff like that.
Yeah, they had something similar in New Vegas, I think.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, they did. Yeah, it was something that was in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4. I don't know why, but for some reason I just remember it better in Fallout 4. Probably because
I think that they've expanded it a lot more in Fallout 4, which is why you probably remember it a bit better.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But in the last video, it wasn't like a showcase thing. They weren't really like displaying stuff. Like the first couple of seconds was a little like cinematic, bit for it to get people hyped, and then the rest was just Todd Howard being all like, "We got stuff. It's great. There's gonna be a showcase on the 11th.
You see that moon? You can crash into that moon.
You can crash into it." Oh my god! If he had actually said that, I would have lost my mind. I still remember. I think it was the E3 that they announced Fallout 76, and he was talking about you could get a poster which was just like the map of Appalachia, which I actually have hanging above my computer right now.
Sick.
And I don't remember what he said verbatim leading up to it, but he's just like, and it glows in the fucking dark. And then it showed it glowing in the fucking dark, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't care what anybody says about Todd Howard. I don't care what he does from this point all onward, within reason. He like, in my eyes, Todd Howard was instantly goated when he said that. Like, hot damn.
Glow in the dark map goes hard though.
I know, right?
Hard.
It's so fucking cool. But to my point, oh yeah, okay. So I do have a point I wanted to make, but I also want to say in the video, producer Tim Lamb is in the background and he's playing Starfield. For context, Tim Lamb has been a producer on every Fallout game so far. But he's just kind of casually playing the game. You can see a little bit of this, that, and the other as he's playing it. I think at the time this video has come out, I know at the time this video is going to come out, because it's going to come out tomorrow. I have a video. This is just breaking that down and looking at different stuff. And one of the things that I noticed I thought was super cool is that that weapon, cross, the hot button thing. Obviously it's made a return, but what they did is they moved it to the center of the screen, made it a lot bigger, and then put a filter over the background that like blurs and darkens it a little bit and then slows down time. So kind of like in Grand Theft Auto 4 when you're switching weapons, a wheel basically shows up. It's not a wheel in Starfield, but it's it's the same sort of hot button mapping kind of thing. It shows up, it's in the middle of the screen, and things slow down, so the game is still going, but because your attention is focused somewhere else, you can focus on switching to the correct weapon you want while you're in the situation that you're in. And it, I don't know, like just that little thing, like, oh my god, that makes so much sense, because like if you're in an actual firefight, and it's like, oh, I want to switch to this weapon, you don't like stop, look down at your weapon inventory, and then figure out like, okay, where is it? There it is. Okay, I got it. Let's go. You think it instantly, reach for it, grab it, and then boom. And like just that one small little change, I think is so cool. But to your point about the art style and stuff, I definitely see it. I think it's kind of a because like they're kind of placing the game in this interesting middle ground in human history or potential human advancement and stuff, because it's not like Star Wars or Halo where we've developed, faster than light travel and awesome fucking spacesuits and laser swords and plasma guns and shit like that. It's not that sort of like higher fantasy sci-fi kind of stuff. And at the same time, it's not something that's a little bit more grounded in a similar reality to our own, like Fallout. It's kind of that weird in between where it's like we're heading out into space. We still, not everything's perfect. We've maybe been in space for a couple decades, something like that. A lot of the technology still looks a little bit older, a little bit more like what we have. But it's still like the future, so things still look a little bit more sci-fi-esque. And yeah, to your point, I think that's an interesting decision, because especially when it comes to sci-fi, you think the more like, fucking like aliens and spaceships and all these big climactic battles and stuff like that, and weird energy stuff. But then like it's like, okay, well, what's the middle point to that? And it's like, well, it's shit that looks like SpaceX, weird dudes wrapped in tinfoil flying on what is essentially what looks like a radiator traveling through space, all the pipes and everything. And yeah, I think it is definitely an interesting creative choice. I'm interested to see what the larger general perspective or like opinion of that is. But like for me, like and I think you feel this way too. Like I don't hate it. It definitely doesn't, maybe look as super nice and fancy and polished as it probably could be, but I think that's kind of the point. Like especially from like Fallout, it's having that sort of like grittiness and dirtiness to it is kind of a little bit more realistic, I totally get that. And honestly, now that you've explained that to me, it does seem a little bit more interesting. I have my issues with the art style, but if there's an explanation behind it, I could definitely look past it. There are some things that I do think looks cool in Starfield. Like there's this one shot I remember from last year, which is like this guy with almost like a fucking skull as a spacesuit helmet, and it looks sick. Oh yeah, that was I think that I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a dude who's like, he's like he's a space pirate. I just don't remember if he's a member of like the Crimson Fleet, which is like one of the factions, or at least a faction that they talk about. But yeah, there are a lot of artistic aspects when it comes to like armor and stuff like that are actually pretty cool looking.
Yeah, that looks fucking sick though. That's one thing I saw back when that I really like. And a lot of the art style stuff kind of reminds me of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare a little bit, like ever so slightly. And I actually kind of enjoy the art style. To be fair, it's a cool kind of, I guess you could say it's a military sci-fi kind of very detailed aesthetic. It's not much like retro futurism, which I'm into. I follow in my spare time. I kind of scroll Instagram looking at all this cool retro science fiction art and fantasy art and things like that. Very much inspired from like the 80s or the 90s and stuff. That's kind of like the kind of aesthetic I like. That's my personal taste. But Starfield seems to be going for something a little bit more grounded and a little bit more, I guess, modern, but also futuristic at the same time, which I can get behind, but it's not my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah. I definitely get it. Like I was saying, it's not, it's as you said, and as I was sort of also alluding to, it's not going to be for everybody, but it is, to both of our points, I think it is definitely an interesting like time period in human history. Like I think
100%.
I think like the Assassin's Creed franchise, because it spans so many different genre like eras in human history. Like every once in a while there's a point where it's like, oh, we're going to be going to I'm trying to think of one specifically off the top of my head. I can't remember the year, but like the Unity in like France and stuff like that. I guess that one was specifically because it was around the time of the revolution and stuff. But like, they'll set a game in like a specific time period, and it's like, really, that seems like an odd time to set a game and stuff, but then you play it and you're all like, oh my fucking god, this was like, you know, one of the coolest things ever, partially because of just, you know, how Assassin's Creed games play, the whole like power fantasy and, you know, just how good they are at making worlds and stuff. But you have a better appreciation of that point in time because you now look at it through a different lens, even if at first it was kind of like that doesn't seem like something that would work, and then somehow surprisingly it works. So like you know, you're not real hyped for, I mean, maybe you're a little bit hyped for Starfield, but you know, you're kind of trying to be a little bit more reserved when it comes to Starfield. What is like something like a game that's coming out soon, or like has come out but that you just haven't been able to like get to it or play? Like what is a game that you are actually like hyped for and excited for?
Probably Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Me being a massive Star Wars fan, that's a given.
Yeah.
But they actually delayed that game by about a month so they could do polish. It was going to come out this month, but they've delayed it another month just so they can make sure everything is good and bug free. And that's something I really like, actually. I'm glad they've done that because we fell into a really dark pit in the gaming industry, and that dark pit is releasing something and finishing it later. All these corpo heads in the industry with stocks and investments into these games and in these companies and projects are trying to push them to be released far earlier than they are ready. And that's exactly what happened to two of my favorite franchises by now. It happened with Fallout 76, with that incredibly dire release we went through back in 2018. And it happened with Halo Infinite, which to this day is still struggling. It's pretty much DOA. It's in a horrible state, and it's going to take years to fix.
Right.
And releasing games like that is a death sentence, which means all of the hard work that designers and developers and programmers have put into that, and artists into their models and their materials and things like that, all of that is going to waste for the sacrifice of public image. And it's just to push out an unfinished product. And I heavily disagree with that. And I'm glad that Starfield hopefully isn't going to struggle with the same thing. Though this is Bethesda, so there will definitely be bugs, features included. But yeah, I'm just kind of like trying not to be too optimistic or too hyped about it, as not only am I a pretty busy guy right now, I have a lot going on in my personal and work life that is kind of preventing me from being too hyped about something that's going to distract me like that.
Yeah.
But Fallout 76 taught me a lesson, and Halo Infinite taught me even more. And it's a few very sad lessons, but it's stuff that'll stick with me. So, you know, always, especially in this day and age, always prepare for a game to be released in an unfinished and buggy state. And make sure that, you know, you've seen some gameplay, you've seen some release reviews and things like that before you actually buy one. And I'd say pre-ordering is like gambling. Don't fucking do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as you said, there are a lot of companies now that are starting to push out games before they're like finished, and then they spend the next like several years, you know, trying to fix them and update them and stuff like that. It's kind of like a trend that's been happening ever since kind of like DLCs started getting pushed out. Like the long form development time on games has just kind of diminished, not because DLCs themselves were kind of like a catalyst to something bad, but like it kind of showed to some game developers that they could put out a game that maybe wasn't 100% finished, and whether or not that's because they just didn't put enough effort into it, or just, you know, the development process has just gotten so much more intensive. They put out games and they're not 100% finished, and then, you know, sometimes they're like, you know, 80% finished, and then there's just like a little bit of extra patching, a little bit of extra work that needs doing. We were talking about, before we started this interview, we were talking about the Hitman series and how I'm a big fan of the Hitman series. When Hitman 1 came out, and I mean like the new Hitman, not the original Hitman, so like Hitman 2016, when that came out, there was, I think, one map, and that was the fashion show in France. And then I think after that, like every month, every 2 months, something like that, they would put out a different map, and then they would put out another map and another map and another map, you know, in a sort of episodic kind of way. And it was weird because when you first bought it anyway, I think it was still like $60, and it's like you're paying $60 for one map. Granted, it's a really nice looking map, and you know, it's a Hitman game, so there's a lot of different ways you can finish the game and stuff. But when you bought that, you're still like, it's kind of like a pre-order or a season pass. You're banking on that the rest of the content that's going to get put out is going to be worth that total investment. And you know, we can speculate on whether or not that's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing. I did it with Fallout 4. I bought the season pass when it was only like $20 before they hiked it up a little bit. But I mean, like my mindset is, it doesn't matter if the DLC that gets put out or not is of a subjective good quality or not. I just know that I'm going to buy them all either way because I love Fallout. And like, even it's like, oh, but the fucking Far Harbor wasn't good or Nuka World didn't have enough in it. Like, I don't care. I'm still going to get it because I love playing Fallout. Whether the story sucks or whatever, the gameplay is what I'm here for. What, you know, I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in the actual story, the actual plot of Fallout 76. I couldn't tell you anything other than you meet the Overseer at one point. But I could tell you how much I've enjoyed playing the game, actually playing the game on my own with friends for YouTube stuff. I can tell you that. I can, like, the rest of it doesn't matter to me anyway. But my point is, games are starting to kind of move, or at least they feel like they're trying to move in that direction. It's argumentative whether No Man's Sky or Fallout 76 had the worst release. I think they both had the worst release, just for different reasons. But with No Man's Sky specifically, and just what, I mean, you know, it came out, it was fucking awful. Everybody was all pissed off about it. But then they just buckled down, hit the grind, kept putting out content, patch after patch after update, and had probably one of, if not the greatest comeback in video game history. And I think what a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but some developers are seeing is that a studio put out a game that wasn't finished, and then over time they added content, did patches, stuff like that, and then made the game better. I think that maybe that's what Fallout 76 is doing, has been doing. It's kind of different because it's sort of a live service game. I mean, I guess you could say that No Man's Sky is kind of the same, but my point is, it feels like they're trying to do the same thing that No Man's Sky did without actually understanding why No Man's Sky failed and why it did what it did and then became successful. They're seeing the beginning and the end, but they're not seeing the middle. They're not understanding the point. That's kind of one of the reasons I asked you, like, with regards to YouTube and storytelling and stuff like that, like, why do you do it? You know, because like you see where you began, you see where you are now, but you don't see the middle part, the reason you got from the beginning to the end. And I think that is what a lot of content creators, and more importantly a lot of video game developers, like, miss out. They miss out on the why you do it, on the what drives you. You know, what is your motivation to get up at 6 a.m, start recording, start working on your game, and then going to sleep at night, and then actually wanting or being able to get up and do that all over again the next day, instead of just, you know, getting up and going on a walk or going on a hike or watching a TV, a show, or just doing nothing at all. You know? Yeah. I think it's that drive, the drive that pushes us.
100%.
And in that long-winded rant of mine, it segues pretty nicely into my next question. What do you think, or what do you feel, what do you perceive as, well, I guess actually first and foremost, because like me, you're a content creator, what would your biggest piece of advice for anyone who wants to be involved in, I mean, you do a lot of aspects. You do writing, you do content creation, you do graphic design a little bit, or maybe not graphic design. I've seen you do like 3D stuff, asset creation.
I do 3D models, texturing, things like that. I do that at university, so.
Yeah, but more so like conceptually, like the creative aspect, the creation aspect. What sort of advice would you have for somebody who wants to be involved in that? Because based on what it sounds like, you've been doing YouTube for a while, and more specifically since a younger age, what would you say to people who want to become involved in the stuff that we do, in the creative process, specifically publicly?
So I'd say the Fallout scene, particularly the scene that I'm in, the lore scene, if you will, is very populated by a thing that can only be described as the same shit with a different title.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if you want to really make it, if you really want to have a decent standing in the community, to kind of differentiate yourself from the rest of the slop, you've got to have a personality to go along with that. You've got to have a channel gimmick, and you've got to have something that makes you stand out above the rest. Now, for me, that is my storytelling. I weave in the story that I'm writing, the characters that I'm writing with my lore series. Every 5 videos I've made on the Enclave, I then dropped the full backstory to the Wanderer, and now that I've done the Brotherhood of Steel, I'm going to do the same with the Mantis King, and when I've done the NCR, I'm going to do the Ranger, and then that's all going to lead up to a big finale, which is going to continue the story of the characters I've already wrote, moving into the future of the stories. And that's kind of what makes me a bit different, alongside the fact that my icon is literally just a pink fucking Enclave helmet for no reason, apart from the fact I like the color pink. But yeah, you've got to really find a way to differentiate yourself, whether that's through storytelling and narrative, or that's through personality or delivery. I'd say Toshi is very different because he does a lot of machinima-esque stuff in his videos, as well as covering a wide variety of topics regarding Fallout and not Fallout. So I think that makes him stand out. But for me, it's definitely more rooted in narrative, and you've just got to find what makes you stick out, and you've really got to hit home with it. You've got to perfect it. And it took me a long time to do it. It's taken me almost 6 years now to really find my footing and to figure out what I want to do with this channel and what I want to do with the characters I've written. And I think I've finally figured it out, and I've made my videos look somewhat decent through that as well. If you look back at my older stuff from 2019, I was making all of that on an iPhone because I couldn't afford a PC. And I saved up the money. I worked hard for the rig I've got right now. And with that, I've learned the skills necessary to make a good-looking lore video. And I think that kind of draws it back to how to give advice to newbies in the game. You've got to have equipment, you've got to have know-how, and you've got to have a gimmick.
Do you think that the that process of kind of like figuring things out, because I mean, you said it for yourself, it took you several years to sort of figure that out. Me, I kind of had a better idea of what I wanted to do, at least starting off, but at the same time, I had been thinking about it for years before I even uploaded my first video. Plus, I actually had a secondary channel. I had a completely different channel before this one that I did for a couple months, I think. But it never really went anywhere, so I kind of bailed on that one. And then even before that, like way before that, I was doing creepypasta narrations for a little bit. But then like stuff happened, I couldn't do that anymore. Mostly just like I moved into a different living situation and it became less practical, less easier to do it, like recording and stuff. But
Yeah.
because there is such a long form period where you're kind of just like floundering about trying to figure out who you are and what you're doing and who you want to be and what you want to do and stuff like that. Would content creation be something that you would recommend to like the average person, or do you think that long period of figuring out and understanding, do you think that's too much for one person, or the average person anyway, to be able to like focus on and process on?
I think a lot of us in the Fallout community, especially content creators like you and me, are very creative individuals. And I think if you gave a very creative individual a set of tools to create a video, they'd be able to make it to a rather competent level. But if it was just an everyday person who isn't really invested in anything as heavily as you and I are, or if it was just somebody that just kind of wanted to get in it for the money or the fame or something like that, like all those big shots up there that are making six figures doing boxing matches now and are making very boring, bland, unoriginal content, which is basically slop for children to consume. If you're trying to get into the YouTube game or the content creation game or the streaming game, anything, being one of those, you're not going to make it. You have to be creative. You have to have some form of thing to make you stand out above the crowd. You've got to have personality. You've got to have a channel gimmick. You've got to make yourself interesting, and you've got to have to know how to do it. And I think YouTube channels are very much a learning process. It definitely has been for me. I've been learning this since I was about 14, 13. And my YouTube videos, if you look back to one of my first videos, is literally just me holding my phone, pointing at a drawing I did, explaining the lore of Power Armor that I drew on an A4 piece of paper. That's literally the first video on my channel is literally that. And if you look to my most recent ones, there is acting, there is script writing, there is interesting shots that I've taken in engine, there is like drawings and like custom animations and comics and cartoons and all of these different things that I've wanted to make for so long. And that's all stuff that I have thought of very early on, because I believe myself to be a very creative individual, though I don't want to toot my own horn too much. And the only reason I've been able to make that is because I have the know-how to, I have the passion, and I have the kind of creativity to do that. So do I think a normal person, just an average Joe who isn't very creative, who just kind of wants to get into this for money, would be able to do the things that you and I do? No. But if you have the creativity to do it, yes.
Do you think it's more of like a creativity thing, or like you have a story to tell?
I think it's a good blend of both. Definitely.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we've been talking about that for a while. Like, a lot of the reason and the drive is because you have something that you want to do. Obviously, you want to go out and make money. You can go out and make money anywhere. If you want to, I'm not saying that it's a completely different animal, but if you want to go, like viral or like do something specific that doesn't involve like story, like, makeup tutorials and stuff like that, or like, news, I guess maybe news, maybe a little bit, like you think a lot of stuff you see on TikTok, right? Like oftentimes it doesn't involve like, I say oftentimes, sometimes it does, but oftentimes a lot of content on TikTok isn't really like trying to tell a story. It's kind of like trying to like pass on information, but in like in a slightly different way.
But you see, that takes me back to my point as well. That requires a passion and a personality to do so as well. It's not always about creativity, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely about passion, personality, creativity, and know-how. They're like my main 4 pointers really for content creation, I'd say.
Yeah, like you can look at a channel like Defunct Land, who has made a wide swath of videos talking about various different things, like different theme parks, oh god, I'm forgetting a lot of it, but he's made a lot of stuff about like Disneyland, like old parks that went under. But he's also done, like, his most recent thing was talking about the little, like, oh gosh, what is it? You know, like they're drawn the Disney Channel logo, like that little tune that's associated with it. Like,
Yeah.
the whole video, it's like an hour and a half, like almost 2 hours long. It's just like, who wrote that? Because like when you look at it like a surface level, like nobody wrote it. No, like there's no name attached to it or anything. It's just a thing that was attached, you know, to that little movement that people do on the commercial breaks. But somebody wrote it, and while it's not, you know, Defunct Land's story, it's still a story that he is, or it's still a question that he's passionate about, that he cares about, that he's invested in, and in his passion, in his pursuit, he goes out, you know, looks into what he has to, and then tells a story. And I think whether you're trying to create content for the purposes of telling a story, or whether you're trying to, like, specifically telling a story, or whether you're in it to, you know, just be creative, you know, like artists and singers and musicians and stuff like that. Like, they're not, you know, in the broad conceptual sense, they're not out there trying to tell a story. They're out there trying to be entertaining. But in the process of being entertaining, or putting out something that you think is important, like Critical, for example, Penguins Zero, he's not telling story. I mean, funnily enough, he is telling stories in his videos. But when you watch his stuff, like, it's creativity is a questionable thing. Like, a lack of creativity is questionable when you apply it to him, because you could say his personality is definitely a big part of the creativity of his channel. But in like the broad sense, like, he's not using any sort of, like, you know, wacky and wild, you know, cuts or anything. He's not out here, you know, making like mind-blowing thumbnails and stuff. I mean, as far as I remember watching, I've been subscribed to him for a long time, I don't think he's ever made a thumbnail. I think he just uses the default whatever auto generates for YouTube.
He's just like, the thing is with Most Critical, he kind of falls into the category of the personality thing, because he's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
But like, that's why he's like, so good,
right? It's his charisma. But I mean, to the point, he's, you know, he's passionate about what he does, but at the same time, he's not out here trying to tell a story. To you know, to your point, to my point, it's the same thing. You either need to have a high passion stat, or you need to have a high storytelling stat. Like, there's no real in between. I mean, there can be in between, but you have to have,
you can have a good balance of both.
Yeah, but 100%. you have to have a strong investment, or in one or the other, and that one or the other is going to absolutely change what you put out into the content nightosphere that is YouTube.
100%. I agree with that.
Yeah. What is... So we talked a lot about, like, meaning and shit. So maybe you've had enough. We kind of got into this interview a little like last minute, which we've been trying to for a long time, but I skipped out on a lot of, like, processes and stuff that I normally go through for these interviews, because contrary to some beliefs out there, interviews don't just happen. There's a lot of prep work. There's a lot of groundwork. One of the things I learned in my documentary class that I took in college was that you need to present the questions that you want to ask to whoever you're interviewing well in advance, because they will need time to think of an appropriate answer. You know, it can't just be fucking gotcha journalism where you're just out of the blue all like, hey, I want to know about this, and then the other person's in that awkward position where they got a camera pointed in their face and they're being asked a question that, maybe is a little pointed. Maybe they don't really feel like they can give an adequate response to. Maybe makes them uncomfortable, shit like that. But for this one, especially since we've been talking about, a lot about meaning and stuff like that, what is it that, like, maybe not, well, actually, I'll phrase it this way. What do you think is one of, if not the most important thing that somebody ought to do or to remember or to instill within themselves in order to live a good life?
Stay true to yourself, I'd say. Just don't ever. A lot of the issues I've seen throughout my life is, especially growing up in this day and age, is that a lot of people try to change themselves or try to fit in with the crowd because they feel like they are looked down on for being different. All my life, I've been different. Some have even said, dude, people have came to me, like, even recently, and said, Wanderer, you're 100%, absolutely, without a shadow of doubt, autistic. There is no way. Even though I've never been diagnosed with autism. Like, I actually had a diagnosis a long time ago, and they were like, they said to my mom, he's not autistic. He's very passionate about the things he likes.
He's
and
just really, really fucking stupid.
Yeah, very fucking stupid. Yeah, that's what they said.
Dude's over there eating beans.
Yeah, I eat beans straight out of the can, cold. Don't even put them in the microwave. Cold, fucking cold. Okay, that process is too long for my hungry stomach.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did like an autism test when I was a kid, and they said, oh no, he's fine. He's just like he's just very interested in what he likes, and he's very creative too. And I think I had a few social issues growing up because I like when I was probably about 12, around the same time I was getting into Fallout, actually. I got bullied quite severely, and that kind of whittled my social life down quite a lot. And as I've grown up, as I've learned things, one of the things I learned is to just be yourself and be kind to others as well. And people will respect you eventually enough. They will respect you for who you are. They might not like you, they may not, appreciate you, but they will somewhat respect you for being yourself. And that's something I've learned. I've learned it the hard way, absolutely, because the way I had to learn it was going out and just finding people on my travels, being like, oh hey, you go to the same school as me, how are you? And then we'd get to talking, and they'd kind of realize, I'm not this kind of the person they had in their head. I'm actually like, someone that's quite down to earth, willing to have a conversation with anybody, really. And I've never kind of shone away from being myself to fit in anywhere. I've always kind of tried to stay in the mindset of, if people are going to dislike me for who I am and what I do, then that's on them. And you're going to find friends much easier just being yourself. And that's one of the things that I think throughout life, everyone should stick to. There are far too many people out there that I know personally in my life right now that are pretending to be a version of themselves that they are not, just to fit in with the crowd. And it's something I heavily disagree with, because then you're living a life of lies, and it's not worth living. It's just you've got to enjoy living life. You've got to stay true to yourself and live life as a person you want to be, and don't let other people influence that, unless obviously you're doing something horrid, which I definitely doubt I'm speaking to anybody like that here. But yeah, just be yourself, man. Do what you got to do and be yourself. That's Wanderer top quotes 2023.
You have to unabashedly be the main hero that you see in your story.
Yeah, you've got to evade taxes too. Evade all taxes. Don't let the government take.
Don't pay the government. I was actually gonna be like, what's a funny way we could end this video, just in case I don't want to end in on a thoughtful point. I want to end it in a funny way. Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love
Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love casting spells.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Wanderer, Fallout YouTuber, artist, and storyteller. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of the Atomcast, The best way you can show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmissions, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. Until next time, I thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all out there in the wasteland.